Geoffrey Chaucer and his times. Geoffrey Chaucer is considered the father of the English language, not because he invented a new language, but because he was the most important representative of the evolution of different aspects of the English language. So, to better understand the role that he had in representing this new language, it's a good idea to go just a few moments backwards and try to understand which were the important steps that created this new language. The first century, well, the first century we could divide it in two parts. The first part of the century was occupied by the Romans, so Latin in some way had an important role and influenced most specifically, churchgoers, or anyway, the monks and the monasteries. With the withdrawal of the Romans in the second part of the first century, we have the invasion of the Anglo-Saxons that brought a totally new kind of language, a language that we know came from the northern part of Germany. So these Germanic tribes that had an oral tradition and a language that was very harsh and hard, full of consonants. And we can say right from the beginning that it was not apt to for what we know as a high standard literary language. A third moment in which we have, we can say, the completion of this fusion of different aspects of the language was the date 1066, with the coming of the Normans. So when William the Conqueror conquered England, he brought also a new language. French language surely is sweeter, full of vocals and not so harsh with consonants as the Anglo-Saxon. So there was this coming together of a new language that became always more, a bit fitter to represent a high standard language. Together with this evolution, these three steps that we can have in mind when we consider how it came to be representative for Geoffrey Chaucer, it is important to understand also the role that Geoffrey Chaucer had in that particular moment. In fact, he had a fine education. His father managed to let him go to a normal course of studies, so he came in contact with the big culture of the times. But most of all, he was a kind of diplomat at the court of Edward III, that was the king in this particular historical moment. Being a diplomat, he came in contact with so many people, political diplomats, tradesmen that were going through London. That was a very active and energetic city in that historical period. And most of all, he had the possibility to travel, to go abroad, first in France and then in Italy. In France, naturally, he came in contact with was the great saga of the Le Roman de la Rose, which produced in his, what we call the French period, in fact, the Roman of the Rose. But in particular, I think it is very important for Geoffrey Chaucer the influence that he had and the contact with the Italian culture, coming in contact with the great writers as Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio, paved the way for his organization of his important works. Together with this, another aspect, apart from the linguistic one, is the social view of the times, because the energy that in some way gave rise to this great moment in these medieval times in England is important to understand also how Chaucer managed to be an important active part in this in these activities. In fact, we can say that by the 14th century, we have a kind of new middle class that was coming up. So feudal period was coming to an end. There's strict division from a pyramidal point of view. So there was this difference between the high society and the servants was coming to an end. And so this rise of the middle class in some way. Middle class that anyway is not the middle class that we generally intend, but it was made up of rural and urban people that in some way dedicated themselves to the production, mostly of wool, and then to the trade of these products. So the merchants and the trade in some way acquired a very important role in this active London of the times. And it is also an important thing to remind ourselves that all these professions, some way, organized a kind of guild that was the putting together the interests of a certain organization against other organizations. These guilds will have an important role also in the evolution of the literature and the theatre in England in the future. Socially, this is what was happening, but we have also the historic side. We have already mentioned Henry III, Edward III, excuse me. That was very important because he managed during his reign from 1327 to 1377 to give a kind of referring point to the people of his times. In fact, some of the characteristics could be he reinvented what was already a referring point for the people, that was the Knights of the Round Table, that was important from a legendary point of view with King Arthur. But he managed to reinvent this atmosphere, specifically in Wales, so that he could involve in some way the knights of that referred to him, so that he could better control them in what were the interests of the crown. In fact, he also created it is still present, the Order of the Garter. That is a kind of prize to people that mostly represent the English society. And so there was another tool in the hands of Edward III to give to his knights as a prize, we can say. We know that in the Middle Ages, the power of the king came out mainly through the success in battle. So it was normal for kings in those times to come at war with other nations. It was surely for political, economical interests, but also because a king came out stronger in his position if he managed to win a war or a battle. That is why in 1336, Edward III started this 100 Years' War with France, with naturally different aspects that maybe you would be interested in going back to have a look at. Socially talking, also, we should consider how bad the conditions of the people were in those times. From a sanitary point of view, it was very dirty, lacking the important aspects that should be considered in a healthy nation and healthy town. And that is why together with the merchants that came and went in London in those times, and together with these sanitary conditions, we have what we generally call the bubonic plague. In 1348, in fact, we have what is generally called the Black Death. Anyway, we have the half of the population of England, that was not more than 4 million, nearly half of the population died because of this bubonic plague. So just imagine if half of the population comes to an end, what kind of revolution there is in the interrelationship between the people of the time. And so certain social classes acquired very much more importance in relationship to their working role in particular. But because of this situation, there was much discontent among the people. People were very much critical towards the power of the king because of the taxes. He invented what we generally call the poll tax. Poll is another word for head, so this means that taxes were put on every head, so every single individual had to pay a certain amount of money, and there was no difference between the poor people and the rich people. So this is one aspect of the critical attitude that the people had towards the crown. But naturally, it was not only towards the crown, it was also towards the church, where people saw that the priests and the monks in the monasteries led a very high, wealthy kind of life, while they were naturally in so bad and poor conditions. So, I mean, there was a kind of contrast between what the church professed as a religion and what was really their ways of living. So it is from this attitude that we can start having a look at this kind of early Protestant reform. There is one name that we should remember, and it is John Wycliffe, that gave way to Lollardism, what will be afterwards the Lollard movement, that had an important role in this building up of the attitude towards the religious establishment. Also, because of this, in 1381, we have the Peasants' Revolt. That was a reaction towards the crown of the poor conditions they were living in. And in 1377, when Richard II came to the throne, so this is the second period of Geoffrey Chaucer with Richard II, and he managed in some way in 1381 to control this reaction of the people, promising them that they would achieve what they wanted, even if in a second moment he did not maintain his promise. One other thing to understand this moment is that at the court of Richard II, we have a very important and nice atmosphere, full of culture, full of interesting movements, interesting people that came and went from Europe and in England. So this energy, this interest that the court had also towards art and culture gave Geoffrey Chaucer the necessary framework in which he could achieve what he wanted, and that was to give England the language that it was waiting for the future of its literary evolution, and together with this, the description of the society of the times with so many important characteristics that are fundamental to understand the society of the time even today.